Question time, do any of the Pokemon in the Paldean Pokedex feel out of place, like they should really not be there, like they are wrong? You see, arguably since Gen 6 and inarguably since Gen 8, the Pokemon brought to a region's regional dex have made good sense. This older video of ours went over that for Galar and how the developers themselves stated that they want all of the Pokemon included in a region to feel like they belong and are a part of that region. A cool goal, though not one that was executed perfectly. But was Generation 9 any better? Obviously all of the new Pokemon fit really well. That's pretty much what we talk about on this channel non-stop. But as for the older Pokemon who were put into Paldea's regional dex, do they all fit? And how well? Which ones should really not be here? And for your sake, rather than go through all of them individually, let's go via categories to speed things up. Some Pokemon would fit into multiple categories, but we're just going to keep them in the best category for them. And the first and most obviously perfect category is Kalos native Pokemon. It's no secret that Kalos is based on France and Paldea is based on the Iberian Peninsula, which includes Spain and Portugal. And these two regions, both in Pokemon and in the real world, are literally right next to each other, and thus have similar habitats and wildlife. There are differences, of course, but they are so geographically close that it makes sense that a lot of animals or Pokemon that call one home would call the other one home too. So all of the Kalos natives found in Paldea? Perfect. No explanation needed. And a similar, though lesser statement can be made about the Galarian native Pokemon. Galar is based on the Isle of Great Britain, which is also nearby, though across all of France and then also the English Channel. So these Pokemon may need a bit more justification for being here, but not too much. We can give them a blanket thumbs up first, but I do want to talk about a few of them specifically, like the Applin line. Did you know that Spain actually grows more apples than the UK, meaning Applin actually fits Paldea better than Galar? And Phalanx is here for the same reason it's in Galar, as, like the British Isles, Iberia was at one point a part of the Roman Empire. And Stonejornar, notably, according to its Pokedex, it travels around a lot, but also Spain has its own prehistoric Spanish Stonehenge, as some say, and many other dolmens across the region too. Poltergeist is fun. Pouring myself a pot of water and making a cup of tea is pretty iconically British, but it was actually the Portuguese who initially sold all that tea to the Brits in the first place after buying it up in Asia. Elephants did live in Iberia at one point. In fact, it's thought to be the last place the straight-tusked elephant lived before going completely extinct. And more recently, the Roman Empire brought them to the region as well, which also brings us to Donphan and a new category. Simply, yeah, they're based on things that live here. Or I guess in Donphan's case, lived. But like, squirrels are here too, explaining Greedent and Pachirisu. On top of it just being here because it's the Pikachu clone of Gen 4, and this was the time Gen 4 got their remakes. It's cross-promotion. And on that note, nothing says, I am a mattress expert now, quite like going to school for it. But the next best thing is sleeping on a different mattress every night for a month.
But like, seriously, we just went on a cross-country road trip, so I slept in like 20 plus different mattresses, tripling my previous mattress experience. And none of them were even close to as nice as my Helix.
And it's 7 years old, but the memory of taking their quick and easy online sleep quiz is still fresh in my mind. I think about it every month. It asks you and a partner some sleep preference questions and then gives you their expert recommendations. We got the Helix Midnight Luxe with a cooling cover, a medium feel, a 10-year warranty, and absolutely no fiberglass. All shipped directly to our doorstep, vacuum sealed in a box to make sure moving it is easy. Even though I had to set it up in the studio to get this delicious B-roll and then carry it back up the stairs. I've had a worse time moving other mattresses though, I'll tell you that. And did I mention that US shipping is free? And then we still got a 100-night sleep trial to make sure we loved it. We did, and so I feel great asking you to visit helixsleep.com/Lockston to get not only 20% off of your Helix mattress, but also help out this channel in the process. Which means directly helping my cat Sasha. She's a fur-time employee. Employee? I feel like there's a better cat pun I can do there. Well, the cooling cover helps her sleep between my legs without melting my legs. So that's nice. Sleep good, improve life, win, yay! Visit helixsleep.com/Lockston. Now, I'm not going to go over every plant and animal that lives in Iberia, but here's all of the not previously covered Pokemon that are based on plants and animals that simply live there. Or are Cryogonal, who is just a living snowflake, so like anywhere it snows, it can be. In Spain, though warm, has mountains with snow, So yeah. Sunflora is particularly notable though, as it had a whole little event thing even, and for good reason. While a North American native, the Spanish brought sunflowers back to Europe around 1500, and they became a huge hit. Their popularity spread far and wide for both ornamental and medicinal purposes. Van Gogh was famously obsessed with them. Combi and Vespiquen are particularly fitting too. Bees love Spain, and depending on the year, Spain and Romania are always competing for the most honey and bees in Europe title. Mudbray is fun, as donkeys have a lot to do with Spain. Famously, Spanish missionaries would frequently ride upon them as they were seen as more humble than a horse, and smaller, so they would eat less and be cheaper to maintain. Actually, the Spanish missionary on a donkey is so iconic of the country, it's Spain's unique unit in Age of Empires. While rare, the Egyptian mongoose does live in southern Iberia, as do some species of bagworm, but as for why they chose Fortress instead of Wormadam for their bagworm representative, it's likely because colonial Spain kind of famously built powerful military forts all over the world, cannons sticking out of the windows and all. Spain has the third most sheep in Europe, hence Maripe, and like Braviary and the bald eagle, the Spanish imperial eagle has a much lighter head too. The Ebro River in Spain is considered the catfish capital of Europe. I mean, look at these monster catfish, and so Whiscash in Luminion is iffy. It is questionable for sure. Luminion pulls in a lot of elements from various fish from all over the world, but it is primarily a freshwater butterfly fish, which even if you consider saltwater butterfly fish, are nowhere near Spain. But it also pulls in a few attributes from tripod fish, which are in the oceans all around it. So like, it's here, but it's on thin ice. Pseudo-Wudo Tudo is here only barely. Petrified wood is found around the whole Mediterranean, including Spain and Portugal, though not nearly as much as Greece or heck even Germany further up. It's very much a, yeah, there's some petrified wood here. Pseudo-Wudo can be here, I guess, kind of thing, rather than a, you absolutely cannot not have it because it's iconic. And same deal with Amoonguss and Breloom. Like, yeah, there are mushrooms there, and the Spanish do love using mushrooms culinarily in their tapas, as we covered in the Toad's Cool video. But like, for every mushroom in Spain, there's like a septillion in France, the UK, Germany, Poland, and Italy, which I guess makes a good transition to our next category, general European vibes. Pokemon who are included in Paldea because they fit Europe broadly, more so than Spain or Portugal specifically. There's a lot of dragons here, but also Gulpin and Swalot, who given their love of food and the iconic French or Italian chef moustache and diamond pattern are a good fit for this category. All those dragons though? Yeah, that's pretty much just because Europe is the land of dragons in many ways. The most common dragons in fantasy media are European dragons, and the generic fantasy setting is typically just Middle Ages Europe, but magical, with dwarves and elves and such. Hence also Miss Magius. She's a witch! And Altaria not only uses the Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian word for high in its name, Alto, but it's also based on the Greco-Roman constellation Aquila, which, while an eagle, has dragon associations, hence this Pokemon's dragon type, and the Aquila would later be used symbolically in a lot of European alchemy. Gardevoir and Gallade, while not introduced in Kalos, did fit into it superbly well, to the point that Gardevoir was the main Pokemon used by the Colossian champion. They've very much got the fairy tale prince and princess vibes, or even just the real-world European noble prince vibes going on, be it a prince or princess in times of peace and love, or times of war. Europe is also where we find the original Gothic architecture, the Visigoths themselves, and many Gothic fiction stories, so Gothitel. But as far as hot air balloons go, they were invented in France and are popular across Europe. Spain is even often featured in best places to ride a hot air balloon in Europe, though never #1. And while not as big these days, Europe in the Victorian era started a lot of modern Christmas traditions, including getting the iconic snow globes and tin soldier toys as gifts, which Iron Bundle so nicely resembles, and thus Delibird, Pokemon Santa, is here in Paldea. But hey, speaking of Iron Bundle, artificial Pokemon don't really need a reason to be anywhere, eh? As long as there's people, they can be there too. Hence Magnemite and Electrode being here, and Bayonet, who is just a possessed doll. Arguably Muck too, since it's living sewage, and sewage is wherever people be. People also frequently have pets, and many Pokemon based on animals commonly had as pets have every reason to be here too. Arcanine especially. While not as historically big into dog breeding as the UK, today Spain does have the most dogs per capita in Europe. For every 20 people, there's a dog, and that's just the registered ones. Are your dogs all registered? I thought not. That's why they also introduced 6 new dog Pokemon in this region too. Pet Logic also explains Meowth, though it's also here just because it's an iconic Pokemon that will likely not be in a game moving forward. Which I suppose is the next category. Though iffy as far as setting and lore reasoning is concerned, there are Pokemon who can never not be included anymore due to the power and popularity of marketing. The obvious example here is Pikachu. You think they won't include Pikachu or Eevee in all future games? You're dumb then. This also explains Rotom, Lucario, and arguably Mimikyu. Ditto will never go because mechanically it helps with breeding, and there's also the whole Kanto effect. Chansey, Gyarados, Gengar, Jigglypuff. Yeah, they are here because they are classics. They are popular, but at least they don't feel out of place either. You could fit plenty of them into some other categories. I mean, it's not like they're Frostlass, Hariyama, or Bronzong. Those are some extremely Japanese Pokemon, which is actually why they're still perfectly fitting here. In the early years of the era of exploration, Portugal was getting rich by buying and selling goods between Europe and Asia. In fact, Japan famously was extremely isolationist at this time. They hated foreigners and completely disallowed their trade ships, with the one exception of the Portuguese. Considering that, it makes sense that there would be a few extremely Japanese Pokemon in Paldea, brought back all those centuries ago, explaining all these guys and even some of the new, very Japanese Pokemon, like King Gambit and the Sushi Dragons. Did you know tempura was invented in Portugal? They taught the Japanese how to do it, and now it's a Japanese food staple. But it's from Portugal! Food history is cool! Hypno and Drowsy are fun here though, as they are based on a yokai, the Baku, but they are also a tapir, which live in South and Central America. So, same deal for the next category, only instead of Portugal in the Far East, we're talking about Spain and their colonization of the New World to the west. Actually, this is a pretty important aspect of the region, as all 3 starter Pokemon pull from the Americas primarily. Details in their own video here, but in short, Rio Carnival, Dios de los Muertos, and Mardi Gras. All world-famous American celebrations that Spain or Portugal had a hand in making. So here are the Pokemon they brought from the Americas back to Paldea. The Slowbros could have also been in the last category too, as they are giant salamanders crossed with a hippopotamus, if you had to quantify them with real-world animals, that is. But interestingly, giant salamanders only live in rivers along North American coasts, as well as Chinese and southern Japanese ones. Oricorio is the most questionable here. At first, it's pretty specifically based on the Hawaiian honeycreeper, a Hawaiian native bird with no other birds like it. And Hawaii isn't exactly anywhere close to the Americas. Now, you could argue that it's got some Darwin's finches in its design inspiration, which are from South America, but I think the real main reason it's here is just that one of its 4 forms is based on flamenco dancers, flamenco being an iconically Spanish dance style. And now, going back over to the Far East, while Japan did have that special relation with Portugal, and Pokemon is a Japanese franchise, so of course there are going to be a lot of very Japanese Pokemon, it's also worth mentioning that Portugal also did a lot of trading throughout Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean, to the point that they even tried colonizing some areas and fought wars there, explaining not only new Pokemon like Grafaiai, who being a lemur crossed with an ii should really just be back home in Madagascar, which Portugal tried to colonize, but that also explains Passimian being here, another lemur. And you can't have Passimian without its partner Oranguru, as orangutans live in Indonesia, which as recently as the 1970s was partially a Portuguese colony. And here are the other Pokemon who would be found here around this area that Portugal was heavily involved with. Masquerain is doubly fitting since it's partially a masquerade mask as well. Those are pretty popular there. So now, there's only a few lines of Pokemon left. And will they be justified in being here? This is the other/not the best fit category. First, we've got Hippowdon. So hippos live in Central and Southern Africa, which, don't get me wrong, Portugal had their African colonies, though there's very little overlap between their colonies and where hippos live. So does it fit? It is a sand hippo that has a preference for deserts and hotter climates, so the environment fits it well enough. I feel like it could go either way, so let's say Sure. Next up is quillfish. So blowfish do live in all the oceans where it's warm enough for them, but quillfish is kind of specifically a very spiky blow or pufferfish, which also tends to be the poisonous ones, hence its poison typing, and those strangely avoid Europe, though not for much longer. These have been found in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, but are considered invasive, having gotten there through the man-made Suez Canal. Of course, you could argue that quillfish was brought to Paldea the same way the other Southeast Asian Pokemon were, though I guess it's fine. Camerupt has a decent enough of a reason. While camels aren't really in Europe, they are just across the Mediterranean in northern Africa, including Morocco, which is like right there next to Spain. Easier to cross from there to Paldea than from Galar. Garchomp. You could argue it's a dragon theropod dinosaur thing, so fitting of the general Europe vibe, I guess. You could even say it's a shark, and while not the biggest or most iconic, the Mediterranean Sea still has plenty of shark species there, and that's all fine and passable, but IDK, Garchomp is just kind of its own thing to me. A land shark or sand shark, which still flies like a jet somehow. Spain's got very little to do with jets. I don't know. It's fitting, but definitely deserving of this other category in my eyes. Komala could arguably fit into the category of Portugal in Southeast Asia. I mean, Indonesia is right next to Australia, which is the only place koalas and drop bears live, but they live on the far southeastern and eastern side of Australia, kind of far from Indonesia and the Philippines. Like, it's justified in Alola, because the Alola Dex is less Hawaii specifically and more Pacific Ocean as a whole, which the eastern side of Australia is up against. And also it's right across from New Zealand, Maori's stronghold, and they were the ones who would go live in Hawaii eventually. But I don't really think you can say the same for the Paldean Pokedex. Like, Komala? More like no Mala. That's so kind of far. Wait! Koala only eat eucalyptus, right? So anywhere there's eucalyptus, koala could also be, theoretically, if you brought them. Where does eucalyptus grow? Oh gosh dang geez, Australia and Iberia. A few other places too, but Australia and Iberia. Oh, you're loose, Komala, hence the chlamydia. But I guess there's also some justification for you being here. Just barely. Get it? Because you're a bear. Let's talk about bear tick next. So you could make the Americas argument here, but Spain never got that far north. And as far as polar bears in the old world go, they don't really touch much of Europe either. But if you consider this sad fact, you can justify bear tick being here. Consider Cetitan. It's based on a variety of whales that live in the Arctic Circle, and it's here in Paldea. Why? More details in its own video, but in short, Spain was one of the last European countries to practice whaling. They would sail all the way up to the Arctic Circle to hunt these whales and bring them back. All the while the rest of Europe is like, dude, stop. Oh, there's more for me. And that's also where polar bears are. So, yeah, kind of weak, but at least it's something. Tyranitar, though. Tyranitar is just a kaiju Godzilla Bemular guy with no business in Spain. Like, maybe it's also an armadillo-girdled lizard, but those live in the deserts of southern Africa. Like, you could argue popularity factor. I do know Tyranitar is one of the more popular pseudo-legendary Pokemon, but I think the best argument you've got is that it too is a Japanese import, I suppose, being a monster kaiju and all. But it's not like a super obviously Japanese monster the way that like most yokai and things are, right? It's not like a sushi samurai yokai kimono artifact, it's just a big lizard. But still, that's something. So at least it doesn't have no justification. And that was, actually all the Pokemon in the Paldean Regional Dex. So actually, really cool that none of them, flat out, do not work. Though, I think the Dex is leaning a bit too heavily on the exploration and colonization that Spain and Portugal did. Like how the Galar Dex kinda did the same thing and also had the whole, it works because it's a classic zoo animal and the British invented zoos! I really want them to keep on doing this Pokedex design philosophy of making the returning Mon fit the region, but I don't want that to restrict where those new regions can be. Fun fact, every Pokemon region has not only been in the Northern Hemisphere, but also has been a colonizer country. Like, I've got my fingers crossed for a New Zealand region, but aside from including, like, the entire Alolan Dex and some South American and East Asian Pokemon, there's not as much justification for a lot of Pokemon. Like, you could include some European Pokemon too, because New Zealand was colonized by the British, but would any Unovan Pokemon work, for instance? Just a thought. What do you think? Let me know down below, and never stop using your noggin.